So good morning. I am Miles Wernz, Director of Baptist Studies here at Abilene Christian University, and coming to you with a very special conversation this morning with Oleksandr Geychenko. I've known Oleksandr for a few years now, and we've been able to meet. We first met when you came to Abilene to visit Oleksandr Seminary back in, I think it was probably like 2017. One of my colleagues, Dan Stiver, has been over and done some teaching for y'all in Ukraine. But Oleksandr runs a seminary for Baptist ministers in Ukraine, and so I wanted to have him on this morning just for him to be able to introduce not only the work that his seminary is doing, but also to help give a sense of what it means to try to do theological education in the midst of a war, and how Ukrainian Baptist churches are responding to the this manifold crisis. So Oleksandr, thank you so much for your time. I really am grateful for. What time is it there where you are right now?
It is 35 minutes past 5 in the evening.
Okay, so in the evening time. All right. Well, Oleksandr, tell us a bit about who you are and the work that you're doing.
Well, first of all, good morning to you, Miles, and to anyone who will be watching this video. It's a great pleasure for me to be on this conversation, and really appreciate this opportunity. As Miles said, we met each other quite a while, and it was a really interesting trip for me at that time. And a new place I visited in Abilene, and I still remember the fire in the chapel. The sun was shining through the stained glass window. I really appreciate that beauty of that chapel. It was quite an impressive moment in my life. Well, as Miles said, I am the principal, the president, if you wish, of Odessa Theological Seminary. Odessa Theological Seminary is a Baptist theological institution, which was established first as Odessa Bible School back in 1989. Still during the Soviet time. It was a local initiative by local ministers, and a bit later, with the help of Baptist World Alliance and also the office of Baptist Union in Moscow at that time, it was established as the first seminary in the Soviet Union at that time, actually. But in 1991, the Soviet Union collapsed. So here it is, the first Ukrainian Baptist Theological Seminary. I am a graduate of this school, and I also worked here in the capacity of a senior librarian and then academic dean for 7 years. And then I did my PhD studies in the University of St. Andrews in Scotland. And in 2018, I was invited by the Board of Trustees to take responsibility of the president. And since the time, I'm responsible for that. Okay. Yeah, probably now.
Yeah, tell us a bit about your students. Tell us about kind of where are they coming from, and what kind of ministries do they find themselves being involved with?
Majority of our students are mature students who are 23 and up. Most of them have families, have some kind of ministry, and before the COVID time, our normal size of student body was 320 students. During the COVID and the full scale of war, the number of our students dropped. So at the moment we have 165 students, which is not bad, but not as good as it used to be. We have different programs. Majority of our programs are of bachelor's level, but we also have master's program, and our master's is focusing on pastoral ministry and more like applied theology. The rate of male and female students is almost like 50-50, although sometimes we have more female students than male. And also we have programs for training pastors, Sunday school teachers or Christian ed people. Also, we have several programs specifically focused on training those who work with teenagers. We also had a very good program in training missionaries. Unfortunately, due to COVID restrictions and the restrictions imposed by the martial law, we cannot run the missionary program at the moment. So we are thinking how to reshape it at the moment. Students on our programs, they come from all over Ukraine. We had a number of students from Russia and from Moldova, but during the Russian aggression starting from 2014, that the numbers of those who come from Russia dropped significantly. And of course, with the full-scale war, when the borders with Russia are closed, we just cannot take these students anymore. That's pity, but that's the reality in which we are operating at the moment.
Could you tell us a bit about how are your students doing? How are they doing? How is this? What are some of the ways in which this war has changed the shape of ministry for them? And here I'm always thinking about like how are the folks who will be viewing this, how we can be praying for your students as well.
Okay, let me start a bit from almost a year ago.
Sure.
Probably several weeks before. I don't know if you still remember all that tension which kind of accelerated beginning with October 2021, and that pressure kind of grew and grew, and probably sometime around January we started discussing with the faculty and with the leadership team, okay, what will we do if the full scale would start? And we started developing a plan, evacuation plan, because Odessa, actually, if you look at the map, Odessa is the biggest city on the Black Sea shore. What you can see on the screen behind me is Odessa and Odessa seaport. It's one of the most important places on the Black Sea in that case. And also Odessa is very, very strategic because it connects the Black Sea with Kiev and also Moldova and Transnistria. Transnistria is the area which is still under control of Russian troops, and the war in Moldova took place in early 1990s. And there is still a limited contingent of Russian troops located there. So, and we thought that Odessa will be probably one of the most desirable direction for the attack. So we started developing a plan. We met several times with all the employees, and on February 16, I was participating in the meeting of Ukrainian Baptist Union's Council. At that time, I was in charge of the all higher theological institutions, and I was representing them on the Union's Council. And At that council, we were discussing the possible scenarios of how the war will start, and the regional pastors from all the regions of Ukraine, they were assigned by the leadership of the union to start accumulating food, preparing the places for evacuation, and also to start thinking how they can actually help people, especially from southern and eastern parts of Ukraine. At that time, I realized that probably the war is something more serious than kind of serious reality than we could think of earlier. So when I was back, and it was just almost a week before the war started, immediately when I was back, I offered the employees to take their wives and send to the place, to the Western Ukraine, where we had arrangements with the local church to accommodate us for some time. And nobody was ready for that. So I was called on February, I was awakened on February 24 by a friend of mine who said over the phone that, well, are you still sleeping? It has started. So, and I heard the sound of missiles hitting the airport. And so we immediately gathered all the employees. We, some of them, since we had a plan, some of them sit in their cars and headed to the direction which we pointed them to. And also we made the public announcement to the students that Odessa Theological Seminary is temporarily kind of closing its programs until the situation will be clear. So for almost 6 months, our campus was not operating as the campus of Odessa Theological Seminary. We, most of the faculty evacuated to the Western Ukraine, and we were operating as a distributed office over Zoom. And at the middle, in the middle of April, we also restored some of our courses through distance learning. But before that time, most of our chairs of the programs, they were operating as kind of spiritual consultants for the students. And we also immediately switched from educational activities to helping our students to evacuate, connecting them with those services, especially Christian services that help people to evacuate from the front lines. Also helping them financially, because at that time we managed to collect some crisis fund, which we used to redistribute for 3 particular areas. So we helped people who were evacuating if they needed money for fuel or maybe to cover the price for their transportation. We were helping people to purchase all kind of necessities, food, or maybe well, something they need to sustain their lives, because immediately our economy stopped working properly. And the third option, third area was medicine, or some urgent needs with medicine, or communication needs like cell phones. I mean, the packages for cell phones or internet and so on. And so we were working as that kind of emergency office for almost throughout all March. And at the end of it, we started kind of slowly changing our activities, because the government and the local government kind of stepped in. You wouldn't believe me. First 2 weeks almost totally paralyzed the state structures. And the reason the country has not collapsed was in many ways due to activities of volunteers, including Christian volunteers, especially in the areas which were close to front lines. For example, the city of Irpin, which is the Kiev suburb. It was the battlefield for almost a month. So the only way to evacuate people there was with the help of Baptist church located there. When people came to the local government, the local government said, well, go to this address. And this address was the address of the Irpin Bible Church.
Right.
Irpin Bible Church was operating during the times of occupation all the way till the city was liberated. So that was kind of activities we were involved during the first couple of months. We still have that kind of crisis fund, and from time to time we help our students. Some of our students were caught in the cities, like you probably heard the name, the city of Mariupol. And we were helping some of them to be evacuated. One lady was actually evacuated during the heavy shelling, and there were several groups who were evacuating from Mariupol, and one of those groups were lost. So we thought that it was hit by the Russian missiles or shells, but finally we could hear about them that they just went kind of a circle way. So it was, those were really terrible weeks. I hardly slept 4 hours a day just for probably like 4 weeks or so. It was really terrible, emotionally and physically.
Do many of your students and faculty, do they have friends and family? I'm sure that they have friends and family who have been affected by this across the Ukraine. Do they have friends and family in Russia?
Well, I think this is one of the most disappointing aspects of this war. For example, I have a lot of colleagues in Russia, and even before the war started, there was a Eastern European accrediting agency, Eurasian Accrediting Association, Euro-Asian Accrediting Association. And with the colleagues, we were discussing all this, growing tension between Russia and Ukraine, and we called upon them to produce a kind of a manifesto which calls the Russian Christian to raise their voice in order to stop this insanity, And at that time, we heard quite disappointing words that, well, nothing will happen, nothing will happen. And when the full-scale war started, we were trying to communicate what we're experiencing, and some of the colleagues, they said, well, we just don't want to see that, because probably for them, they were shocked.
Yeah.
And even on the level with the relatives, for example, I have a cousin in Moscow, and I recall probably it was the second or third day of the war. I wrote on my Facebook page that, well, we are bombed by Russian flights and missiles. So the war has started, actually. Well, probably it was the second day. And she wrote, well, Alexander, what are you talking about? They're liberating you. You are talking like a Nazi, you know. And after I tried to explain what we're experiencing, she just unfriended me, and that's it. So that's just, you know, that's just a picture of what was happening. Unfortunately, I should admit that relations with majority of Russian Christians, and I purposefully call them that way, to remind about the German Christians. I think they are frozen until the war is over, and until they realize what are the consequences and what should be the steps for kind of admitting the atrocities and starting the way of kind of processing that, given the proper evaluation. Probably that's the word of all that.
Okay. How has this, you've spoken a little bit about this, but how do you think that this will affect the way in which you train ministers going forward? Both now, I mean, you've talked a little bit about it, how it's affecting things now, but the faculty are operating both as professors, but also as spiritual guides and ministers to your students, and as counselors and as resource and helping people find resources, and as social workers, and like you're wearing all the hats that there are to wear. How do you have a sense of how this will affect the way you train ministers going forward, like even after the war has ended?
Well, first of all, the war, the full-scale war, created imbalance in how the Christianity is spread all over Ukraine. Of course, the eastern part of Ukraine is mostly depopulated now and de-Christianized too, because people were fleeing from the front lines. A lot of Christians, young families, majority of young families, they emigrated. According to the United Nations estimations, over 7 million of Ukrainians ended up as the refugees in different countries of Europe and all over the world. And probably approximately about 4 or 5 million more are internally displaced people. Can you imagine the Ukrainian population before the full-scale war was about like 42 million people. So it's almost 1/4 of people just moved.
Yeah. Wow.
So that means that a lot of Christians ended up in Europe, and including some ministers. However, in some areas, the new groups of people were established. So that's one of the challenges which we're experiencing. We have now a new generation of people who were not trained as ministers, but who see themselves as the ones who are mature enough to take, so to speak, the mantle and get involved into the ministry in different locations. So some of the theological institutions developed the short-term programs in order to help these people to acquire necessary skills and knowledge in order to kind of sharpen their skills and understanding what it is to be the ministers. That is the one consequence. The second consequence is that we realize that probably for the next generation or so, we will be dealing with people who will suffer in one way or another from trauma, either as the one who lost someone during the war or was the victim of war atrocities, rapes, or some other violence, or suffered as soldiers suffered of PTSD. So that means that we need to develop programs which will help the students to deal with these challenges. So in Odessa Theological Seminary, we developed as a starter a 1-year certificate program which would help people to kind of to educate them in the area of kind of counseling and how to deal with different kind of traumas. But we also are working at the moment at the plan, and it will be like a 3-year plan, strategic plan, to develop a chair of counseling. And we already got initial confirmation from one of the Christian foundations from the States that we can receive the grant to start this chair and develop that. So at the moment, I am working on, together with my colleagues, on job description, and we will start the process of selecting the candidates shortly. And hopefully these people will help us to develop this area. Because I should admit that we didn't have much experience in that area before that. Our seminary was very strong in biblical studies and theological studies, historically. And this is our stronger side. And we are more like, we were strong in academic affairs. We publish a theological journal 2 times a year. We try to kind of reflect on our practice together with colleagues. We try to write things, but kind of Christian counseling and that kind of area is pretty new. It's pretty new for us.
Right.
So this is the second challenge, and I think the third challenge which we'll face quite soon is the crisis of family. And it will be countrywide because a lot of families find themselves separated because wives and children moved to Europe, the husband stayed here. Some of them are soldiers, and living amongst over a year now as separated families, it's kind of complex, you know. And we know that will be another challenge for us too.
Yeah, absolutely. How have you found? Could you give us maybe one or two examples of how Ukrainian Baptist churches have been responding to both to the war itself, but also to the many crises that that the war has opened up?
Thank you, Miles. This is a very good question because, as I already indicated, Ukrainian Christians, and I'm speaking in generic terms here, were prepared for this war, actually. I mean, in terms of they organized themselves quite quickly. Well, most of can you just imagine, the full-scale war started on February 24, and hundreds of thousands of people started moving from the east of the country to the west. Most of the highways were jammed for like for a week almost. I just give you an example. Several families of the faculty set off for Western Ukraine at the noon of February 24. They came to their destination on February 26. They stayed overnight at the place of one of the faculty member on the way, but they came late because they were driving the major highways. So in some places, they were in the traffic jam for 12 hours, and they were not moving forward at all, you know. So that's what was happening all over Ukraine. And who were the people who were feeding these masses of people, who were providing shelter for them, were giving water and food? Those were Christians. Most of the houses of prayers were turned into the shelters, temporary shelters. Some churches even didn't have a chance to worship because their worship halls were turned into the dormitories, and people were sleeping on the floors. Most of the houses of prayers which had the basement, they were turned into the shelter in order to protect people from shelling, you know. On the western border, Ukrainian churches organized the kind of centers that were distributing food. They were providing information how to cross the border and where to find the place of refuge there. And we had very close connections with the Baptist Union of Poland, Romania, Hungary, Slovakia. So the level of organization was just tremendous. And as I said, also Christians organized quite quickly because we know how to do that. A lot of churches turned their kitchen into the centers of canning food and providing this food to the soldiers. So that was just one of the examples. Another example is that Ukrainian Baptist Union had agreements with the Baptist World Alliance and with some humanitarian aid organizations, that these organizations amass food and all the necessary goods in Poland, Hungary, and other areas. And as soon as the war starts, they will start kind of sending that. And Baptist Union organized the distribution centers, and people from other regions came on their vans there, loaded with food and necessities, kind of toiletries and medicine, and ran to their destinations. That was the second example. And the third example is that a lot of Ukrainian, well, a significant number of Ukrainian Christians, Baptist Christians, started working as chaplains. First of all, as voluntary chaplains to the Ukrainian military. And now there is a law in Ukraine which allows those who are qualified to work as the chaplains in the military unions. And that was another challenging issue for us because historically a significant number of Ukrainian Baptists, they were kind of pacifists. But with the full-scale war and the war, illegal annexation of Crimea and illegal proxy war in Donbass, they started reassessing this perspective and started thinking in terms of more like just war concept, or at least some form of that.
Right. Yeah. I can't imagine the ways in which this kind of event will change the shape of Ukrainian churches for generations to come. So what are the kinds of ways in which we can both be praying for you, but and offering support?
Well, that's just the prayers. Most of the people who are involved in some way of ministering to others, whether it is kind of social work, pastoral work, or being an educator, after over a full year of full-scale war, we feel tired, or in many cases exhausted. For example, just recently I realized that I feel really exhausted. That is why after my business trip to Amsterdam, which I hope I will have within the next couple of days, I decided I will take 2 weeks off just to go out of emails, communications, making decisions and all that. And the same situation, I just had conversation with the chair of the board of trustees, and I explained that the reason I feel that way, and he said, "Well, I understand, because majority of the pastors in the recently liberated areas and also in other places, they feel the same way. So we are getting tired. We are getting tired because the field is larger than the amount of workers we have. The challenges are bigger than our capacities to deal with them. And, as I said in the beginning, my office and our faculty, we switched to kind of a social relief office. Instead of doing what we used to do as an educational institutions, we learned how to do things differently. So this is one of the most kind of challenging aspects. Another one is that, according to different estimations, the war will continue at least for a year, as we see it here, and maybe more. Who knows? It will, it will depend on sufficient supply of armors to our army, the amount of soldiers we have for protecting Ukraine and kind of running the Russian invaders off our country, the decision of Mr. Putin to escalate or de-escalate, there are many factors, and this uncertainty creates another pressure on all of us here, because during the first weeks of war, our horizon of making plans was just 1-2 days. Then it expanded to 1 month. Now we can think about like 3-4 months ahead, more or less, but no further away,
Yeah.
So it is really challenging, because you're always find yourself under the pressure of immediate, So that's another challenge. So if you could pray for the leadership of the Baptist Union, for the pastors of our churches, for the educators, Christian educators, because we're feeling the same pressure. And I started thinking that probably all of us need some kind of a retreat during the summer time, because otherwise we will not make it,
Right. Yeah.
So this is a challenge for us.
Okay.
And speaking about financial support, first of all, I should thank all our partners and all those who heard about Ukrainian situation and Ukrainian war, and who opened their hearts and their wallets in order to support Ukraine. And one of the biggest lessons which I learned from during these months is what it is to be the body of Christ. And I am an ecclesiologist, and I know what the body of Christ is, but when you experience that, when you experience what it is when one member of the body is hurting, the whole body hurts, that's something real. So, and I'm really grateful for all financial support and social support. I mean, food and everything which we have been receiving since the beginning of war. And as the one who is working with fundraising, I realized that it is easier to kind of attract support for some immediate needs, like feeling the need in this area or that, just providing money for purchasing a vehicle to evacuate people or food to feed the needy. But what is the most critical is to sustain those who are doing their best to minister. And these are operational costs. For example, in our seminary, we have 35 employees, which means I need to raise support in order to pay salary to them. And as you know, our economy is down at the moment, and we almost lost our local support. So we are fully dependent on the international support at the moment. And it is really hard. Well, so far we were blessed, and I'm really, I see the hand of God in these circumstances. So if you could think of kind of supporting some of the Ukrainian institutions or ministers, kind of even with some small amount of money, but regularly, that which kind of adds up and creates some stability. That's my suggestion, if I can. Yeah.
Is there a way on the website for the seminary for people to be able to donate?
We have a partner, we have a fiscal sponsor.
Okay.
In the United States. We actually have two organizations. One of them is Connect International. It is a tax-deductible organization which is based in in California. It's Connect International, and on their website there is a form which you could use in order to donate for Odessa Theological Seminary.
Okay.
Or you can also donate to another organization. It is called American Ukrainian Evangelical Fellowship. It was originally established in Louisiana. I think it is relocated now to Texas, their office in Texas at the moment. American Ukrainian Evangelical Fellowship. I think they also have a website, and you can send your checks to their account. Or
it's good.
Yeah, and I appreciate any attempt to support us, and really, I'm really grateful, and I do mean
absolutely.
That.
Well, thank you for your time this morning. I know you're, like you've said, you have many things to attend to, and prayers for your upcoming trip. I hope that that visa or that permit comes soon, that it'll come through. and look forward to you being able to take a couple of weeks off just to rest. I think that'll be good. So,
well, I hope that will help me to restore my strength, because it's really just maybe one word. I just recently learned a new concept. It is a concept of mental blackout. It is a state of condition of mind which results out of fatigue, anxiety, and being exhausted, to the point that your mind stop working properly. You forget things. Sometimes your memory just switches off, and it's a condition, And I think that there were kind of several moments when I experienced something like that. So, and it is certainly a bad sign. So I need to get some
absolutely.
rest.
Okay. Well, Oleksandr, thank you so much for your time this morning. And I'm going to make this video available so that folks can learn more about your seminary and the work that you're doing, and how to pray for you and all of the churches that are attempting to do ministry in just a situation that I'm sure that none of you thought would ever be the situation you would find yourself in.
Yeah, indeed.
Okay.
And I want to thank you, Miles, for this initiative and for this opportunity. And I want to thank everyone who is praying for Ukraine. Thank you for standing with us. It is really important for us. Thank you very much.
Okay.
And goodbye.
Okay. Goodbye.